Now, I know that I said over and over and over and over, I'm not victim shaming nobody. I just didn't believe Dawn's lawsuit. I felt like it was a little bit whitewashed, meaning that, uh, somebody took the black story and tried to say it in a white way, right? Because it didn't come off as a urban person would be telling the story, which is cool because, that's what you get lawyers and people for, to make it some sound proper, right? But through all the accusations and all the stuff that she witnessed after another with Cassie, all these beatings and him punching her in the stomach at the table. And my thing was, why did she stay there so long, right? Why did she stay there so long, right? And I want y'all to see something, right? Like I said, I was not shaming, and I'm not shaming Dawn Richardson, Rickardson at this time, right? I'm just keeping it real and showing facts, right? And my facts is that she stayed around Diddy, but sat there and said he was this horrible person. But the fact is, you stayed around him after all these allegations from three groups, from Megan the Band to Danny Kane to Diddy Dirty Money, right? And then you got in this lawsuit. Oh, he did this, he did this, he did this, he did this, right? Now, check this out, right? This is just a few years ago. And I'm using this under fair use, okay? Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for the purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is use permitted by the copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use tips to balance in favor of fair use, right? So I'm going to use this under fair use. Now, for the last few days, I've been going over the Dawn Rickardison's lawsuit, right? Now, y'all heard how she described Diddy in this lawsuit, right? Check this out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Ever since you went independent, do you talk to Diddy?
Not as often as I'd like, but that's the homie forever.
Yeah.
People will never understand that relationship. Like people didn't know that Puff had bought me out of a contract prior to even getting on the show.
Really?
So I had loyalty to that, and that's a respect that I understand that I loved my group, and I know that it wasn't I chose Puff over my group at the time. It was more of when someone does that, where I come from, you got to respect that on a large level. So I gave loyalty to him, and I think I'll never forget that. And my father and my mother, for what we gone through, we'll never forget that. And I think with all his crazy, I look at things like that as loyalty. So I was loyal to him, and I paid my dues back like a businesswoman should.
Right.
Until he said, okay, your dues are paid. And then I left. Not, I'm going to leave you after you did me something.
And then just.
And a solid and just say, oh, by the way, thank you for buying out my contract, but now I'm going to go over here. I just never said anything about
I didn't know
that.
He bought that contract
and
out.
I never told anybody. I took all the hate that came with it, that people thought I had didn't choose my group. I just took it. Because it's a loyalty thing for me. It's a respect.
Absolutely.
And I didn't want to get shelved. I didn't want to get financially and business wise. It just wasn't smart.
Yeah.
So I wanted to pay my dues. So I did. And I always respect him for that.
Yeah. Wow,
yeah.
That's nice. What's the best advice he's ever given you? I'm sure there's a bunch.
He don't give advice. Puff is smart. He does it in his actions. He never sleeps. He has people always around him, and he pays attention to the pulse. He's a marketing man.
Yeah.
More than anything. And he's blessed with an ear. That's two very powerful things.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're smart, you don't take advice, you pay attention. So I just paid attention, you know, and that's it. You know, it wasn't all perfect. It wasn't all great.
Yeah.
He's exactly what people say he is,
Yeah.
but he's also, he gave me a shot. I don't have the story that you have. I have I got out alive.
Yeah.
And I got out with a business. And I don't have no bad stories. That was only support. So
Wow.
if you do good by other people, they'll do good by you.
I agree.
And so that's what I tried to do. I didn't do it perfectly. It probably was imperfect and it probably looked crazy and I probably made mistakes, and I totally did make mistakes along the way. But I did the best that I could.
But you've owned up to it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I've never got the vibe that you were scared.
I wish more would see it that way.
Nah, I
you know,
mean,
yeah. But I am. I said, you know, you do your best, but I am still a girl from New Orleans, Louisiana,
Yeah.
from the Ninth Ward.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be all kind of imperfections and all kind of in there. You know what I mean? I'm still my mama's child. I'm gonna do my best, you know, but I'm still my mom's kid, and I'm still.
Bro. Come on, man. Yo, that's dangerous. That's real dangerous. This was 2017. So way after everything. Like 2-3 years before the pandemic. Yo, now let's go. Hold on. Now check this out. Let's go back to her lawsuit while we're here, right? Yo, this girl's scary, bro. She's scary. She's scary, bro. What page was I on? I think. Oh yeah, right here we were. Ciroc, Diddy beats non-payment. This girl's scary, man. And like I said, women, I'm not saying all y'all are like this, but it's women like her, bro. If you've been here since I've been reading this lawsuit and hear her today on this video, like, yo, you talking about day and night? You talking about hot and cold? Yo, bro, this girl's scary. So in and around the summer of 2009, Miss Richard and Miss Harper were, hey, hold on, y'all, chill. Here's the other thing. The other girl, what's her real name? Hold on. Before I get to this, let me show y'all something else about Dawn, right? Check this out, y'all. The other girl from Dirty Money, remember she keep putting her name in the lawsuit, right? Miss Harper, right? So Dawn keeps saying, "Oh, them two always seen it. They was in the kitchen together when Diddy dragged Cassie up the steps. Remember that? Well, listen to what she got to say. Kaleena, that's her name. Kaleena Harper. Former Dirty Money member Kaleena Harper denies claims made in Dawn Rich's Diddy lawsuit. Some do not align with my own truth. And this is what she says. Matter of fact, let me put it on the screen so y'all can see it yourselves. So you know it ain't no cap. The real Kaleena, that's her Instagram if you want to go see this yourself. I acknowledge the recent lawsuit filed by Dawn Richard, in which my name has been mentioned 33 times. While I fully respect Dawn's right to recount her experiences, I want to emphasize that her account reflects her personal perspective and should not be interpreted as a universal truth applicable to everyone involved. It is important to understand that while I was present in some of the same professional settings, I'm not going live with nobody right now. I'm sorry, homeboy. Many of the allegations and incidents described in this suit are not representative of my experiences, and some do not align with my own truths. Like, this girl is lying. She's cat. Tony and I have always conducted ourselves with the highest level of professionalism and integrity. We were not involved, nor we were aware of any behavior that could be considered abusive or unlawful. As this matter is now a part of an ongoing legal process, I will refrain from discussing any specific details further. My focus continues to be on my family, my music, and my work, which I pursue with the same dedication and positivity that have always guided me. I trust that the legal system will handle this case with the fairness and thoroughness it requires, and I support any process that seeks to uncover the truth. So, once again, I feel like the girl Dawn is on some BS. I don't feel like she's on the up and up. So in or around the summer of 2009, Miss Richard and Miss Harper were required by Mr. Combs to perform as a part of Diddy Dirty Money and attend numerous promotional events, including late or overnight parties, all of which were under contract between Mr. Combs and Ciroc Vodka, or between Mr. Combs and Diddy Beats, pursuant to the Bad Boy Interscope record deal. Miss Richard was never compensated for the extra time she spent fulfilling Mr. Combs' promotional contracts, including the Ciroc and the Diddy Beats campaign. Now, did she say any of this to this girl when this girl asked her? Right? Diddy ain't owe her nothing, and he was such a, like, yo, bro. Mr. Combs did not compensate Miss Richard or Miss Harper for these appearances, other than just $5,000 each on a handful of occasions. Mr. Combs' ongoing explanation for the withholding compensation was that their appearances were a requirement for their tour. Additionally, Miss Richard was required to appear and to promote Diddy beats through the parties, albums, songs, and videos. Over time, Mr. Combs was paid 6.2, 6.25 million for 25 Ciroc shows that Miss Richard was required to attend. Following each show, Miss Richard and Miss Harper approached Mr. Combs to inquire about their insufficient and sporadic payments. Mr. Combs routinely responded with statements as, "You bitches aren't grateful, and you don't want this." Miss Richard estimates losses from Ciroc campaign promotion totaling at least $1.5 million. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs received an advance on Diddy beats for which Miss Richard received no compensation. Like, why do he got to pay you for his beats, for his deal with Diddy beats? Because you went to an event and you wore them or you promoted them, that you got to get a portion of his deal? Like, yo, this girl's tripping. Like, she's talking like a wife or something in a divorce. Mr. Combs sexually harasses and assaults Miss Richard. Between approximately 2009 and 2011, and like I told y'all, that interview she did right there was 2017. Between 2009 and 2011, throughout Diddy Dirty Money's recording process, rehearsals, and performances, Mr. Combs repeatedly ordered Miss Ricard to strip down to her underwear. He frequently referred to her as a bitch or whore and made demeaning remarks about her body. Come on, bro. Did y'all hear this girl just now talk about Diddy? Do this sound like the same person that from 6 years later, she doing this interview after he talked to her like this? And that's what she got to say about him 6 years later? He frequently referred to her as a bitch or a whore and come on, my nigga. Like, come on, this girl, yo, man. And she stayed. She stayed. Alternately calling her lazy, fat, ugly, and skinny. So how could she be fat and skinny? How could she be fat and skinny, bro? Calling her lazy, fat, ugly, and skinny, particularly in front of his friends, producers, and bodyguards. Mr. Combs frequently held meetings with Miss Ricard, wearing only his underwear despite Miss Ricard's protests and repeated requests for him to put on clothing. In response, Mr. Combs called her a bitch and a whore and reminded her that she should be grateful for the opportunity to be here. Yo, bro. Yo, bro. Yo, bro. Dawn Ricard. Like, come on, man. Come on, Dawn. Is this the same girl? We still under fair use here, right? I gotta let TikTok hear this.
Ever since you went independent, do you talk to Diddy?
Not as often as I'd like, but that's the homie forever.
Yeah.
People will never understand that relationship. You know, like, people didn't know that Puff had bought me out of a contract prior to even getting on the show.
Really?
So I had loyalty to that, you know, and that's a respect that I understand that I loved my group, and I know that it wasn't I chose Puff over my group at the time. It was more of, when someone does that, where I come from, you got to respect that on a large level. So I gave loyalty to him, and I think I'll never forget that. And my father and my mother, for what we gone through, we'll never forget that. And I think with all his crazy, I look at things like that as loyalty. So I was loyal to him, and I paid my dues back like a businesswoman should.
Right.
until he said, okay, your dues are paid. And then I left. Not, I'm going to leave you after you did me something.
And then just,
and a solid
yes.
and then say, oh, by the way, thank you for buying out my contract, but now I'm going to go over here. I just never said anything
wow, I didn't
about
know he
that.
bought
I kept,
that contract
and I
out.
never told anybody. I took all the hate that came with it, that people thought I had didn't choose my group. I just took it. Because it's a loyalty thing for me. It's a respect.
Absolutely.
You know, and I didn't want to get shelved. I didn't want to get like financially and business wise. It just wasn't smart.
Yeah.
So I wanted to pay my dues. So I did. And I always respect him for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's nice. What's the best advice he's ever given you?
He
I'm
don't
sure there's
give-
a bunch.
He don't give advice. Puff is smart. He does it in his actions. He never sleeps. He has people always around him and he pays attention to the pulse. He's a marketing man.
Yeah.
More than anything. And he's blessed with an ear. That's two very powerful things.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're smart, you don't take advice, you pay attention. So I just paid attention, you know, and that's it. You know, it wasn't all perfect. It wasn't all great.
Yeah.
He's exactly what people say he is, but he's also, he gave me a shot. I don't have the story that you have. I have I got out alive.
Yeah.
And I got out with a business. And I don't have no bad stories. That was only support.
Wow.
So
there was no bad stories. It was only support. Does that sound like the same person in this lawsuit, y'all? She's dangerous. She is dangerous. Often while they were recording in the studio, Mr. Cohn would hold parties where he would invite young men and women who were often scantily dressed and appeared underage to use drugs and engage in sex acts. Miss Ricard observed Mr. Combs and his colleagues kissing, groping, and inappropriately touching the young women. Upon information and belief, the participants often left the immediate area to have sex and returned shortly thereafter. She a dirty motherfucker. On numerous occasions, between approximately 2009 and 11, under the guise of preparing for performances, Mr. Combs will intrude into Miss Ricard's changing room at Daddy's house unannounced while Miss Ricard was undressed. Even though a female stylist was present and assistant, Miss Ricard with her wardrobe was present and assisting Miss Ricard with her wardrobe. Mr. Combs would grope Miss Ricard's body, including her bare buttocks and her chest area near her breast, with no legitimate purpose and without Miss Ricard's consent. Mr. Combs caressed her buttocks to show the stylist where he wanted her high-waisted pants positioned, and attempted to touch her breast, claiming to show the stylist where he wanted her bra straps to go. When Mr. Combs would enter the changing room, Miss Ricard would cover her chest with her hands to prevent Mr. Combs from seeing or touching her breast. When Mr. Combs would touch her body, Miss Ricard would attempt to swat his hands away and state, "Do not touch me." Mr. Combs frequently smacked Miss Ricard's buttocks, often commenting on her body, knowing that although she was too skinny, she had an ass. Ignoring her visible communicated discomfort, Mr. Combs persisted and continued to intrude when Miss Ricard was in the dressing room, continued to touch her buttocks and breast area under the guise of showing the stylist what to do, and continued to smack her buttocks without her consent. In or around October 2010, Diddy Dirty Money performed in Glasgow, Scotland where Mr. Combs engaged in overt sexual advances towards Miss Ricard. Excuse me. In numerous occasions, when Miss Ricard exited the dressing room fully styled, Mr. Combs looked at her approvingly and smacked her buttocks while making comments such as, "You're looking good. Okay, Dawn. Okay." And I see what it is. I see what that is in a flirtatious tone. Each time Miss Ricard moved away and asked him not to touch her. But Mr. Combs disregarded her protest. On their last night in Glasgow, Miss Ricard witnessed Mr. Combs and several other males gangbanging. Bro. Bro. Do I need to go back to her interview again? On their last night in Glasgow, Miss Richard, Miss Ricard, witnessed Mr. Combs and several other males gangbanging Mr. Combs' female assistant at the hotel pool. Miss Ricard immediately left and went back to her hotel room like she did in the other room, and I'm sure she moved furniture against the door again this time. She never participated in nothing. Bro, man. Man. On their flight back to the United States the next day, Miss Ricard asked Mr. Combs where his assistant was. Mr. Combs replied, "I don't give a fuck where that bitch is." Miss Ricard later learned that Mr. Combs had taken his assistant passport with him to the United States, leaving the assistant stranded in the United Kingdom. Oh my God. And you stayed working with this dude. Wow, okay. In Glasgow, Miss Harper confided in Miss Richard that her husband and manager, Tony Vick, was abusive. After especially severe after an especially severe assault, she confided in Miss Richard that she wanted to leave Mr. Vick, and Miss Ricard, helped her to plan her exit from the relationship. However, Miss Harper and Mr. Vick reconciled, and both Mr. Combs and Mr. Vick, who had a close relationship, learned of Miss Ricard's role in helping Miss Harper. She helps everybody, y'all. She tried to help Cassie. Now she tried to help this girl. But she don't never help herself get the hell out of here. Both Mr. Yo, this girl is a trip. Both Mr. Combs and Mr. Vick became noticeably distrustful of Miss Ricard with her exaggerated her fears of harm and reprisal. When Mr. Combs would require his Diddy Dirty Money bandmates to stay at his residence in Miami, Miss Ricard would barricade herself inside her room at night, placing heavy furniture against the door because she feared of being harmed in her sleep. Why stay there? Why would you stay there? Why would you stay there? If you that scared that you got to barricade yourself in this man's home, how do you barricade yourself in somebody else's home? How do you barricade yourself into somebody else's home, bro? In or around late December 2010, Miss Ricard, Miss Harper, and Miss Ventura were in Mr. Combs' Los Angeles home when Mr. Combs stated, "I want to gift you fake titties for Christmas." Mr. Combs reached out and cut Miss Rich's breast without her permission and stated, "You're an A. I'm thinking a D." Miss Ricard reconciled in shock and left the room. Or recoiled the shock and left the room. She didn't go home. She just went back in the room and barricaded herself in again, right? Oh my God, bro. Throughout the above mentioned time period, when Miss Ricard resisted Mr. Combs' advances, Mr. Combs retaliated by denying her singing parts in songs, removing her from songs, refusing to allow her to sing in performances, and turning her microphone off during performances. Yo, bro, did she say any of this 6 years later? The more Mr. Ricard rebuffed his advances, the more Mr. Combs' retaliatory behavior increased. Yo, bro. Hey, she said it ain't pronounced Richard. It's called Ricard. That's how she said it, brother. Do this sound like the same person? Is she talking about the same Diddy? Mr. Combs assaults and falsely imprisons Miss Ricard. And or about December 2010, Diddy Dirty Money was preparing for an upcoming performance on Saturday Night Live. As usual, rehearsals lasted for days without the opportunity to eat or rest. Come on, Dawn. You got to stop, baby. You got to stop, man. You got to stop, baby. And the rehearsal schedule was unpredictable. After waiting all day for Mr. Combs to call or send a car, you didn't have no money in your own, baby, to go get something to eat while you was waiting for this dude. Really? You didn't have no money, no more. You couldn't go to Western Union and get your mother to send you $50. Like, come on, man. Come on, man. Like, after waiting all day for Mr. Combs to call or send a car, Miss Ricard received a phone call from Mr. Combs demanding, "Where the fuck are you bitches? You bitches don't want this. Y'all don't deserve to have someone pick you up. Get a cab." Miss Ricard and Miss Harper immediately took a taxi to the SIR Studios. Shout out to SIR Studios, one of my favorite spots in New York. Studios in New York, anxious because Mr. Combs sounded enraged. Upon their arrival at SR's, Dawn, you're making me tired, girl. Upon their arrival at SIR Studios, Mr. Combs and Harper were waiting for them in the lobby. Mr. Combs screamed obscenities at them. "Where the fuck were you bitches? You bitches don't want to win. You don't want this, right?" I'm so tired of y'all. Miss Ricard noticed people in the lobby were reacting to Mr. Combs' tirade. Embarrassed, Miss Ricard asked Mr. Combs to stop swearing and calling them bitches in front of everyone. Mr. Combs' facial expression shifted as he stepped towards Miss Ricard, raised his arm, and swung his fist at her face, towards her face. Believing that Mr. Combs was going to hit her, Miss Ricard braced for impact. Before Mr. Combs could strike her, Mr. Combs' bodyguard grabbed her, escorted her out of the studio, and forced her into the Bad Boy Records Bentley that was parked outside. Miss Harper ran after Miss Ricard, and Mr. Combs' bodyguard closed and locked the Bentley doors with both women inside. Inside the vehicle, Miss Ricard realized there were no interior door handles. There were none, or you don't know how to open the door of a Bentley. Please don't tell me, girl, there's no door handles inside of a Bentley. Please don't tell me you're saying that. I'm not saying I own a Bentley, but I've been in quite a few. And I was able to get out. There are doors. Yo, this girl, man. Yo, man. Oh my God, y'all. Dawn. Inside the vehicle, Miss Ricard realized there were no interior door handles and that they were locked inside with no way to escape. Miss Ricard's belongings were in the studio, but she was able to call her father from Miss Harper's cell phone. Miss Ricard relayed to her father what had happened, and she needed help and feared that she would go missing. I bet you she stayed after she got out that car, y'all. Moments later, Mr. Combs' bodyguard removed only Miss Harper from the Bentley, leaving Miss Ricard locked into the car for over 2 hours. And I bet she stayed, y'all. Miss Ricard screamed as loudly as she could, but no one responded. In New York City, as busy as New York City is, on SIR downtown on the west side, you telling me in and out, as many people go in and out that studio. Nobody heard you screaming outside that car. It's many people that will walk by. Now the car is soundproof. Oh my God, bro. It was late evening in the wintertime. The windows were heavily tinted and the interior of the car was dark except for faint interior lights. Miss Ricard's belongings and winter coat were in the studio. While the ignition was off and there was no heat. Yo, bro, you telling me you could the ignition's off and you couldn't open the car door? Dawn. Come on, Dawn. Miss Ricard's belongings and winter coat were in the studio. While the ignition was off and there was no heat, with Mr. Combs' prior threats and violence running through her mind, Miss Ricard felt sheer panic, terror, and feelings of claustrophobia at being locked in a small, dark, and closed space with no way to communicate or call for help. She began to feel cold and fear for her life, not knowing when or if she would be released. Mr. Carr's father drove to New York from Baltimore and arrived at the studio approximately 2 hours later. You telling me her father drove a 3-hour drive in 2 hours? All right, I'm going to say he was speeding. Okay. Only after her father arrived and demanded to see her did Mr. Pierre order Mr. Combs' bodyguard to release Miss. So the car is parked in front of the studio. She was able to call her dad from Kaleena's phone and tell him she's locked in this car in front of the studio. And the father comes all the way to New York and see this car in front of the studio and don't break this nigga window to get his daughter out. He goes in there and talks to them. Okay. Only after her father arrived and demanded to see her did Harve Pierre order Mr. Combs' bodyguard to release Miss Ricard from the vehicle. Mr. Pierre ushered Miss Ricard's father between several rooms at SNR Studios, where he waited for approximately 2 hours before being able to confront Mr. Combs. Once Miss Ricard's father expressed that he intended to contact the police, Mr. Combs warned him to think about your family and think about your daughter's career. Her father appeared visibly frightened by Mr. Combs' threats and actions, which in turn made Miss Ricard feel terrified for herself and her family's safety. The next night, Dirty Morning performed on SNL. Mr. Combs subsequently called Miss Ricard, complimented her performance, and concluded with the threat: "You don't call your dad unless you're in the hospital." So after he locked her in the car, y'all, for 2 hours and drove, her father drove for 2 hours, bro, to get her out this locked car. She go do Saturday Night Live with this nigga the next day. You serious? And then he tell you, you don't call your daddy unless you in the hospital. So you this scared of this dude, bro. And all the stuff I just said happened. And now he locked you in the car on top of all the stuff that happened. And you go work with this nigga the next day? Yo, bro, this nigga Diddy must be Candyman, Freddy Krueger, or somebody. Like, hold on for a minute. Hold on for a second. Because this is the girl that just 5 years ago make it 7 years ago. But 7 years after this incident, she got locked in this car, right? This is the same girl, y'all.
If you do good by other people, they'll do good by you.
I agree.
And so that's what I tried to do. I didn't do it perfectly. It probably was imperfect and it probably looked crazy and I probably made mistakes and I totally did make mistakes. I got out alive.
Yeah.
And I got out with a contract.
Wow.
Prior to even, we're just shaking things up. You know, we need to have tunnel vision on that. I think there's a lot of things going on.
Talk to Diddy?
Ever
since you went independent, do you talk to Diddy?
Not as often as I'd like, but
ever since you went independent, do you talk to Diddy?
Not as often as I'd like, but that's the homie forever.
Yeah.
People will never understand that relationship. You know, like people didn't know that Puff had bought me out of a contract prior to even getting on the show.
Really?
So I had loyalty to that, you know, and that's a respect that I understand that I loved my group and I know that it wasn't I chose Puff over my group at the time. It was more of when someone does that where I come from, you got to respect that on a large level. So I gave loyalty to him. And I think I'll never forget that. And my father and my mother for what we gone through, we'll never forget that. And I think with all his crazy, I look at things like that as loyalty. So I was loyal to him and I paid my dues back like a businesswoman should.
Right.
until he said, okay, your dues are paid. And then I left. Not, I'm going to leave you after you did me something.
And then just,
and a solid
yes.
and they say, oh, by the way, thank you for buying out my contract, but now I'm going to go over here. I just never said anything
wow, I didn't know
about
he
that.
bought
I kept,
that contract
and I
out.
never told anybody. I took all the hate that came with it, that people thought I had didn't choose my group. I just took it.
Yeah.
Because it's a loyalty thing for me. It's a respect.
Absolutely.
You know, and I didn't want to get shelved. I didn't want to get like financially and business wise. It just wasn't smart.
Yeah.
So I wanted to pay my dues. So I did. And I always respect him for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's nice. What's the best advice he's ever given you?
He
I'm
don't
sure there's
give-
a bunch.
He don't give advice. Puff is smart. He does it in his actions. He never sleeps. He has people always around him and he pays attention to the pulse. He's a marketing man.
Yeah.
More than anything. And he's blessed with an ear. That's two very powerful things.
Yeah.
Right? And so if you're smart, you don't take advice, you pay attention. So I just paid attention, you know, and that's it. You know, it wasn't all perfect. It wasn't all great.
Yeah.
He's exactly what people say he is,
Yeah.
but he's also, he gave me a shot. I don't have the story that you have. I have I got out alive.
Yeah.
And I got out with a business. And I don't have no bad stories. That was only support. So
wow.
There was no bad stories. What was I just reading, y'all? There was no bad stories, y'all. She don't have no bad stories, y'all. I'm confused. I'm confused.